So what I'm trying to do is basically starting creating like a few texture lines. I'm going with the volume of the shape, and what you will see is like where the light source is hitting, I'm actually very conservative right now. I'm actually trying not to draw too much lines or texture lines.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to Magma Classroom. We have our special host, Udi Kalmanovitz. Udi, how are you doing this week?
I'm doing great. Great to see you, man. How are you?
Great to see you as well. I'm just coming off of traveling a bit, doing quite a bit of traveling and not sleeping. So I'm waking up. I'm waking up with your education today.
Yeah. Well, it's actually 6 p.m. Here, but I'm feeling like I'm waking up as well. So we're on the same page.
It's been one of those days, huh?
Yeah.
Well, that's great. So what do you have on the list today to cover?
Yeah, so actually, I wanted today to talk about how to draw the ears. Yeah, so I think it's not so talked about subject, and like if we're talking about like the anatomical structure of the ear, it's kind of complex because we have all these weird shapes in there and things are swirling and different stuff. So what I wanted to do is actually talk about a little bit about drawing ears, and people that already follow the stream and know me know that I mostly draw from imagination. So that means that I usually try to find and create like all kind of patterns and systems that will help me to like memorize things and know how to create them from imagination and know them by heart. So yeah, that's what I will show today, and I'll try to make it actually fairly simple. So I will start with actually talking a little bit about proportion and the placement of the ear on the head itself, because first of all we need to get the correct size and angle and the placement, and then I will talk about the structure and the fine details and how to get it right, and maybe even create different kind of ears. What if we want to create like elves and orcs and all kind of stuff? And we will find out that it mostly have the same like base to it.
That sounds fantastic. I was to add to this. So the thing that allowed me to study and evaluate the shape of the ear, or to learn it, was and I jump skipped over the 2D part because I can never do it, and I switched over to. Have you ever done creating an ear with 3D topology, like building an ear? It's one of the hardest things to do, but having to stare at it for that long definitely helped me. So, but going back to basics here, I feel like is going to be even more enlightening in this particular topic.
Yeah, and you know, for me, I talk about it like quite often. Like for me, like actually um, messing around with 3D helped me a lot with drawing and understanding volumes and different structures and stuff like that. So I think that you know, we're in different times. I think like I actually advise my students to mess around with ZBrush and different 3D sculpting or modeling softwares, because I think it's all like complementary to one another. And if we think of like maybe more classical approach, then we can actually see a lot of like classical artists that were doing painting and sculpting as well. And I think those two mix very well together.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So yeah, let's jump in. By the way, Saul, do you want me to maybe share my screen?
Yes, I would say go ahead and let's switch it up.
Yep. Just a sec. Let me just grab like the.
And while we're doing this, for those watching or tuning in, there will be instructions to join provided in the description, and we've also dropped it in the chat.
Excellent.
Okay, you're good to go.
Yeah, I'm all set. Okay, so first of all, first thing first, let's talk a little bit about the placement and the size and the proportions of the ears. So obviously, everybody is a little bit different, but we'll try to approach it like in ideal proportion or try to get a little bit of average thing going on. Um, let's check brush. Okay, so let's create a quick a quick head base in front view. Nothing too complex. Um, I won't go right now in detail about creating the head. If someone want to see like the previous episode where I discussed it a little bit more in depth, uh, please go ahead. And so this will only be like basic marking. And also let's create another one in like profile view. And for the profile view, there is something that it's important to emphasize. Like in profile, our cranium, like the round, like the spherical part of the skull, in profile is actually more like an oval, like an ellipse. So you probably you want to consider maybe adding a little bit of volume in the back part of the head if he's looking this way. So that means that if my skull will be probably here, so I'll do something like this just for now. So, okay, let's talk a little bit about the placement and size. So the way I try to approach it, I look at the overall shape of the ear, like it's like we're taking a shape of a heart, like a simple heart, and let's divide it in two. So we have this shape right here, and what we're trying to do is actually like round a little bit the bottom part. So it's like half heart with a little bit rounding of the bottom part, which will be the earlobe. And then we will have two like connecting points. So we have like the top part, which is where we put like our glasses. So if you wear glasses, this is where you put your glasses, the top part of the ear. If you don't have glasses, maybe you put the pencil on top of your ear. So this is where it will go. And we'll also have like the bottom connecting dot. So this will be like a little bit above the earlobe. If someone doesn't have earlobes, so it will be a little bit lower. And basically what I do is like I'm looking not only on the overall size of the ear, I'm looking on those two connecting dots, and then I'm thinking of where do I want to connect them. So I usually start actually with the top part of the ear, like the top point, because this top point will always align, always, most of the time, will align with our eye line. So if I'll take off my headset, so you'll see that if I'll just take like a horizontal line from my ear, it will go to the top, from my eye, sorry, it will go to the top connecting point of the ear. And if I'll take, let's say, a pencil or a brush, I got a brush here and I'll put it on top of my ear. So this is the line that we're looking for. So if I'm going like in profile view, it will be easier to see it first. So what I want to do is this. We have like the jawline here. Let's actually mark it maybe with different color. So we have the jawline here. What you want to do is actually continue the jawline. You don't have to draw it. You can actually look for it, like imagine it. you want to continue the jawline and find the place it meets the eye line. Okay. Now the ear will always be behind the jawbone, and this is very important. A mistake that I often see, like with a beginner artist, they are creating a face. Let's say they are doing something like this, and this is like a basic structure for their head, and they're doing something like this, and then they put the ear somewhere here, and the jaw goes behind the ear, and this thing never happens unless you got really bad problem with your ears. So what we want to do is always put the ear behind the jawline. It's very simple. Look for the jawline, look for the place it meets the eye line, and this is the marking that will help us to say, okay, what we actually want to do right now. Let's get rid of this. What we actually want to do right now is look for this X, and I know that I got like the top point connecting here. And if I want to check for the bottom point, I usually go with the bottom of the nose. Okay, so usually the earlobe can actually go a little bit under the height of the nose, maybe between the nose and the upper lip. Now, obviously, there are people with bigger ears, smaller ears, so use your judgment when creating it. But right now, I'm looking for about the height of the nose, which will be around here, and then I can connect the bottom part of the ear. So this will be basically, I'm like getting those two birds with one stone. I also connect the ear in the right placement in the head, and also it helps me to get like the correct size. Now, when I connect the top part, so if you wonder how high should I take like the top part of the ear, usually I'll try to align it with the eyebrows. So that means, sure, John, thanks, man. So that means that if I have like this top part of the ear correspond with the height of the eye line. So if I'm looking like the above it, like the toppest part of the ear, it usually will align with the eyebrow. So that means that if I use like this line to create the base for my eye, so this will be like the eye. So if I'm having the eyebrow here, so usually that should correspond with the top part of the ear. Okay, so that's mostly it. It's fairly simple. Now, let's talk what happens in the front view. So in front view, actually what happens is that we need to find the correct angle to put the ear. Now, we know that some people have ears that are more tilted forward, and some of them like more tilted back. So obviously we can also use judgment here. But let's say that we want to find something that we might call average. And I don't know if there is a real average. It's not like I tested like too many people, but let's look at the head from a top view. So imagine that you look maybe on my bald head from the top. So when we look at the head from a top view, the back part of the head, and sorry today for the scribbly lines, I actually saw I just finished the workout before we started, so my hands like
That'll do it.
They're really shaking.
Peak hand performance time for me is about 3-4 o'clock in the afternoon, and then it slowly starts to dip.
I did like a 30 minutes heavy bag workout, man. My hands are so shaking. So
I love it. That's great.
Please forgive me. Okay, so I didn't have any other time to do it today. Okay, so let's say this is a head from a top view, and I got like this will be the nose, and he's looking this way. Okay, so basically what I do is like I imagine if this is a 90-degree angle right here. Okay, this is a 90-degree angle from the head. So I imagine like getting more of a 45, maybe a little bit higher angle than a 45 angle. So this will be the ear. and I'll have something to connect it right here. Okay, so this is about the angle I'm trying to look for or imagine from a top view, just so we can keep it in mind. So how do we treat it from a front view? So front view, basically what we want to do, the connecting dots are in the same spot. So I'm still looking for uh, the eye line, which is here. And if I'm looking for the nose, it will in front view will sit usually in the bottom of the circle of the sphere, so it will be around here. But what needs to happen is we need to get like a feeling of a little bit of perspective, like we're tilting the ear a little bit back. So it's not like this; it's more a little bit tilted back. So try to think of it like try to imagine you place the shape, the simple shape we just did, like the half heart shape. Try to imagine you put it inside of a simple card. Imagine it's a card, okay? And then what you want to do is you want to tilt this card back a little bit so it will be foreshortened, like so. And then basically what happens to the shape inside, we can say you basically just squish it a little bit. But I can it will be easy for me to say and not give you the card example or the perspective example and just tell you to squish the air a little bit. But I think that if you're not imagining what you're actually doing, like with the angle of the ear, you probably won't get it the way you want it to look or feel. So try to feel like you're actually tilting this shape a little bit back this way, right? Um, and that will what will happen to the shape. So now that I'm thinking of the perspective and I know where I need to connect this shape, I can actually just like create this shape all over again around here. Now, something important to note, usually I see that like students of mine, usually a more common mistake is actually creating the ears too small rather than too big. And I feel like the reason for it is that like people are afraid to create big ears, so they take it like to the other direction and actually create it too small. So once you actually know where you want to connect the ears and what's supposed to be the proportion according to the head, I think it's much simpler. And obviously, then we can take this simple shape like and try to play around with it. Let's say if this is like the best shape, maybe I want to make it a little bit more angular. Maybe I want to create something like so, or maybe I want it to be a little bit more elongated. So we can start playing around with it. And here comes like actually observation and try to look at different ears and get like different shapes and different patterns and stuff like that. But we can all start with the same, it can all start with the same base to it. So
Hey
that will
Udi,
be
can we
actually,
could we turn on the sequence panel so we could show the canvases? I just want to make sure others know that they can jump in here and
yeah,
join
sure,
you.
sure. Yeah, sure. So yeah, I already see that we have like one canvas active. So feel free to jump in anytime you want. Um, so another thing to keep in mind, and this is from personal experience, when you're planning the head and you just like putting the layout for the ears, before you create hair and before you put like hair on the head, the ear will actually appear bigger. So keep it in mind. So if you're like planning a simple head and you like try to block the shape of the ear, if the head is still bald, then the ear will appear bigger because the hair usually like actually fills the spaces between the head and between the ear. So even if I'll go and do something simple like that, if I put like hair here inside and this hair also covers the spaces, like a little bit of the spaces between the ear and the head. So that will actually make this ear appear a little bit less, the word I'm looking for, like it less protruding, like outside. Okay, and once you like, I can share my own personal experience. When I was 16, it was the first time I shaved my head, and like then I look at my ears and they seemed like crazy big to me, and I said like, what the hell I was thinking. So yeah, so just keep it in mind when you're drawing the head. The ears will appear a little bit bigger if there isn't any hair like covering all those spaces in between. Okay, so now let's talk a little bit about how to play around more with the shape in perspective, because eventually maybe I'll create head in a 3/4 view, but then I want to look at the head from a top, a little bit from above or a little bit from below. And I want to create or try to develop this freedom where I can play around with the base shape of the ear in different angles. And it's like it's I think that's a very important tip that goes for every shape or body part or whatever you want to like try to develop like a full control of it. So what you want to do is actually isolate this shape and work specifically on doing this shape from different angles. So that means you not only want to create heads from different angles, you want to actually take the ear and create it from different angles. Maybe we'll talk next week about drawing the nose. You want to draw noses from different angles and so on. So what I will do here, I want you to take a look on this like box I created here. And let's imagine that right now I'm giving you scissors or a knife, and I ask you to cut the shape of this ear from that box, right? So what will happen is that you will have something that looks you will have something that probably looks like that. Okay, so I actually cut this shape and I give it a little bit of width to it, just so we can actually, like, I give it a little bit of width and thickness, not width, a little bit of thickness to it, just so we can imagine it like as a very crude and simple shape. Now, we do need to keep in mind that the realistic ear, that the actual ear is not flat. So when I cut like this shape out of a box, I'm creating like this very flat ear. But if we're looking on an actual ear, we will sometimes see that ears can like bend or fold, or we can play around with it. But to gain control initially, I just like suggest taking this very simple crude shape of a ear and try to work around with it and present it from different angles. Like maybe you really want to make it like face us and do something that feels more like more frontal, like so. So I'm trying to play around with this shape and see like if I can get it from all sorts of different angles. Maybe I want to tilt it back a little bit. So then I will have something that appears like that. And then I want to tilt it. And just try to play around with it. Maybe you want to tilt it different way, play around with it, and try to gain like to get yourself in a position where you can take this simple shape and put it in every angle you wish. And then actually playing around with it will be a bit simpler. So that is I think very important practice, and you can actually take like the same concept of practice and try to apply it to different body parts, or even like different props or different objects. Like try to first simplify it, gain control of it by learning how to rotate it and tilt it, and then go back to like the more organic shapes and the details. Okay, so now that we got like this part out of the way, uh, let's talk a little bit about what goes on inside the ear. So here, it's something that might look very complex, and I promise you that I will do my best today to actually make it quite simple. So let's, for a sec, I will hide everything here, and let's create the simple shape again. And what I will do is, first of all, I will create like a very simple example with all the shape included inside. So you see, I will try to give this ear a little bit more organic feel to it, like maybe a little bit of a curve here and a curve there, nothing special. So this will be like right now the base for what I want to do. And let's duplicate it and prepare another one here. Okay, so first of all, what I will do is I'll like quickly create those shapes I'm referring to. Without really explaining what I'm doing, I will go into in depth about each and every one of these shapes, and it will be all very clear in a minute. So let's say I created something like this, and this is our like very, very simple shapes inside the ear. And I feel like it's fairly realistic for a line sketch. And we have like the anatomical shapes inside. And for me, it's like something that I really do by heart. I don't even think about it. And I'll show you the way I like memorized it and the way I think about it and the way I teach it to my students. So what you want to do is, first of all, let's divide the ear into two halves. So imagine that we have, let's go back to this layer. Okay. So imagine that you divide the ear in two halves, like this, and we will divide those shapes to shapes that belong to the top half, shape that goes in the bottom half, and one shape that goes in both of them, like part of it in the upper half and part of it in the bottom half. And let's give every shape like a different color, so it will actually be easier to follow. So right now I will continue like this line and also divide this one. And let's start with the first shape that goes in the top half. So let's pick a specific color so it will be easy to differentiate between those shapes. So the first shape, it's actually the easiest, so that's why I decided I will start with this shape. And it's the easiest because it corresponds to the contour line of the ear. It's actually like duplicating the same line. So if I'm looking at the line outside the ear, I just want to duplicate this line and create it another one inside, like, so it will be right here, and this is like the top fold. Now for some people this fold will be like thicker and or maybe thinner. It will be like very folded or a little bit folded. So you can use your own judgment here. And I can actually go a little bit under the half of the ear, but what happens is actually in this part, it kind of fades out. Like imagine like a fold, even like a fold inside your shirt or like on your sheets in the bed, like a fold can fade out. Like we can see maybe on my shirt, we can see this fold right here. So I can see the fold, and then it kind of fades out. Okay, so it usually fades out like in the bottom part. And on this side, remember this is the side where we connected the ear to the head. On this side, this fold will actually go inside and will reach about like the half point of the ear itself. And what I also like to do when I show it is like use a little bit of volume lines, just so you could imagine all of those shapes as 3D shapes and 3D volumes. So I kind of, and here it actually becomes flatter and flatter and flatter because it fades out. So it's like this spiral thing going on that has the same contour as the ear itself, and it goes to the middle of the ear, more or less. Okay, so that's the first shape, and it's a fairly simple one. Okay, the next shape will be on the bottom half. And here I actually connect a few shapes together and treat it as like one shape. And what I do is first I want you to actually take a look at something very interesting. So we have like this pointy thing right here, right? It's where we put like it what holds the ear pods inside the ear. Something that a lot of people don't notice, that just across this like bump, we have another small bump on the other side, which is this bump right here. And the other bump will usually be smaller, and it will also be a little bit lower. So you can see that I have like a diagonal line goes between them, because like smaller bump will actually be a little bit lower than the bump that holds the earpod inside. And another thing to note, that what connects those two bumps, I will use like a different color for this one, but it's the same shape still. What connects those two bumps is like this very steep dent, okay, between them. So the way to, so I look like on those two bumps and basically like the entire earlobe. So I look at this part like it's all one shape, okay? Like it's all one shape, one part. It's like half a donut with two bumps on it, okay? So what I do right now is basically, let's use this color. So I go just underneath the midpoint of the ear and I create the first bump. And then I'll take the second bump, the smaller bump across from it, diagonal line. It should be a little bit smaller, a little bit lower. And I'll have like this dent connecting the two. Okay? So this is like in the bottom part of the ear. And I'll kind of treat like it's all one big shape right here. Okay? It's all one big shape right here. And obviously this part also connects to the face. So we have like this part and we have this part where we connect the ear to the face. Now, what we have left is actually like this weird thing going on right here. So the way to think about it is like I try to actually like compare it to different letters. It's easier for me in Hebrew. I guess it's like a Y shape. Here it's on the reverse side, but if I think of a Y, so if I'll flip it, it will be something like this. So this is my Y shape. Okay. Um, and basically this shape goes from the bottom half to the upper half. And there are a few things that make it what it is. And the bottom half, it actually extrudes from the shape we just did. So if we look again on this bump right here, we can imagine that this shape actually extrudes from this bump right here. So it kind of connects together. This is the first thing to note. So it starts here and it extrudes from this little bump we previously created. And another thing to note, that once it goes to the upper half, it actually splits. It actually splits. Now, when it splits, we get like this small dent right here between those two splitting points. Now, this dent will appear differently on different people. Like so on some people, like this dent will be like really steep and really noticeable, and for some it will be a little bit flatter. On some people, like one part of the shape, let's pick a different color, one part of the shape will be thick, and maybe the other part will be thin. It's not splitting into two exact and equal shapes. So here again, play around with it. Like I feel like if you want like body parts to feel more organic and have like a little bit more character to it, try to avoid symmetry, try to avoid like equal shapes and equal sizes, and try to make things like kind of random in a way. So let's handle this shape. So let's pick like, I feel like orange right now. So I'm actually starting from the bottom half and I'm extruding from this point we previously created. And I'm extruding here and also from this part right here. It's kind of connecting to the fold that fades out. And here I can actually break the shape, like take a steep angle, and then I want to divide it or split it into two different shapes. So I can maybe decide that this part will be actually thicker and this part maybe will be a little bit thinner. And let's give like a few volume lines to this shape as well, so we can actually imagine the thickness of it. Okay, and another thing I will do on a different layer, I will let's pick like a blue color, and I want you to imagine that every part that I mark with blue lines is actually dent. It's actually like a dent inside, and it's like goes to show where something is sticking out and where something is like going in. Okay, so that's basically it. And maybe it looks a little bit complex at first because it's not primitive shapes, it's like very organic shapes. But eventually, if you divide it like the way I did, it's like try to memorize like those three shapes and the placement of them and how they correspond to one another.
What I love about this method, I wanted to jump in. It reminds me of, I mean, in English we have little phrases that we'll use with words to remember something, like I before E, except after C, these types of things. This is like, it's like visual language for the artist to represent the shapes so you can remember these particular aspects. And like, you quickly just roughed out that first ear without having to look at reference or anything. And that's because you've identified these three characteristics that you can isolate.
Yeah, and also like I suggest, I think it's something that I do naturally without thinking, is like I always try to like compare different shapes to things that are familiar for me, like in real life. So let's say even when I use boxes to like block out something. So sometimes I want to block out a character and I use different boxes to get the perspective right. So I look like at the box that I use for the rib cage. I think of it as like cereal box. Why do I think about it as a cereal box? Because if I'll just say a box, then one person will create a box that looks like that, and another will create a box maybe looks like that. But
Mhm.
I can say that this looks like a book, this looks like I don't know what. But if I'm saying a cereal box, then we all know how a cereal box looks like, and we know that it has like a certain proportions. And when you think about something specific that you already know, it actually helps you to get the proportions right, uh, because
It makes a lot of sense. I could see. I mean, it sounds almost like you've kind of, over the years of just drawing and doing this repetitively over and over, you start to associate different shapes based on their proportions. Like I could imagine, like I kind of just imagine like Terminator screen, like you're looking through Terminator eyes and you just see like proportional shapes like all over.
yeah, yeah,
But seriously, I can associate that with things that I do creatively, and they're slightly different, but they help tremendously to be able to remember these things and to be able to apply them later.
yeah. Like almost 20 years ago when I started teaching, I started actually teaching like kids. And when you try to explain to kids like how to get an exact scale or proportion, you always try to compare it to something they know, and I think it's like kind of stuck
Right.
in there.
Oh, I
um,
love it.
yeah. So let's take it one step further. Now, previously we tried to like get like this simple shape right here in different angles, right? And now we talk about all those like patterns and organic shapes we have inside. So what I want you to try to do is like take those shapes we just created. No, maybe I will leave it here so we can actually see it. So let's imagine that we take like those shapes, and if I create again uh, the simple ear shapes, what we want to do is see if you can actually imagine how those shapes overlap one another in different angles. Because like one shape will go inside in a different part, and then it will protrude outside in different area, and they will overlap one another. In one angle one shape will cover the other, and in different angle it will flip. So we kind of want to play around with it. So let's say that I have like this angle right here, and I'm actually creating again like this very flat representation of a ear, of an ear, right? So yeah, okay. So I have like this very simple shape right here, and this will be like kind of the angle I will probably create if I want to put this ear in front view, like on the front view head. And what I want to create right now is those simple shapes we just did, or those organic shapes we just did inside the ear, and try to get them in an angle and put emphasis on what will overlap what. So let's start basically with the first shape we did. I'll go by the same order. And then you will see that what I do is sometimes I start a shape and I won't finish this shape because I know that on this part of the ear, another shape will overlap it and will cover it. So I'll try to explain it as I go. So let's start with the purple shape. It's the first one we did, the one that spiral with the contour line. So basically, the beginning is very simple because I know that I work with the contour line right here, and I stop right now on this height because like the the third shape we did like in orange in the middle of the ear will actually protrude a little bit outside and will cover it. So I will leave it right here, and on this part we have like this spiral part of it actually goes inside the ear. So let's give a little bit of volume lines to it again. And here it's not real volume lines because they are actually becoming kind of flat here, right? Because of the shape we created. But let's imagine. that it's a little bit more organic. And right now, let's take like this turquoise color and create a little bit of the bump here. So I actually made the bottom part a little bit too small, but let's imagine that it has a small bottom of the ear. So I'm imagining like this actually in an angle, and I know that it already has like the bump across from it. So that's probably it. And then let's take the orange color. And what I do now is I start to get this shape, and maybe it's protruding a little bit outside, maybe sometimes even outside the contour line. Like some people have like this part of the ear, like very, like it's kind of sticking out. So try to like observe and study it. So right now it's kind of protruding outside, so it will cover a little bit, the purple shape I initially did. So that's why I stopped like this shape around this part, because I know it goes behind the orange shape, which covers it. So I kind of try to imagine how those shapes are actually mixing together, overlapping one another, and what shape covers the other shape, and so on and so forth. Now, what you want to do is actually like the same as I showed before when you want to play around with different angles. So if you're kind of trying to play around with the shape of the ear and create it in different angles, try to create those different shape in different angles. Like maybe here I really have like something will really get covered. Like here, I will have like only a little bit of this shape showing, and a little bit, let's take a darker color, a little bit of this shape showing here. And look, this might actually, like, you see the gap that I have here, this gap like kind of disappears because of the angle. It's very, very shallow, and kind of disappears because of the perspective. And then basically I have this shape, which I don't really see the dent that we saw here. I don't really see this dent because of the angle. It goes inside, but I can really see in this angle the shape protruding outside, let's say. And of course, for different people, it will be like it will stick out more or less. But try to figure out like how much you want to take it like outside and make it like stick out in different shapes of ear. Now, let's take it one step further than that, and that's actually making the base shape look a little bit more organic. Okay, so there will be like two main keys to make the base shape to look more organic. The first one will obviously not use a box a shape to it, and like don't cut it so flat, and make it rounded a little bit. The second one is, remember that the ear is not flat. We can actually fold it a little bit. So if we actually, let's take this shape, for example. What if I'll say, imagine that I have like this dotted line here, and this dotted line represent a place where I want to actually fold the ear. So if I'll kind of recreate it, so I have something like that. And this is a place where I actually want to imagine that I kind of folded. I created a fold that took the ear a little bit in an angle. So once I'm folding like this part and take it here, I already created something that looks a little bit different and looks a little bit more organic just by folding it. Now, if I'll take this shape and actually create it again, and instead of cutting the shape from like, it looks like I cut it from cardboard or wood. Let's imagine that I rounded out a little bit and do something that looks a little bit more organic, and then all of a sudden we are left with something that looks more like that. And then I can obviously add all those lines that I kind of try to learn by heart and give it like more organic feel to it and try to play around with the overall shapes of it. Okay. Now, once we do that, I want to show you two cool things. First will be like creating different ears. Let's say we create elves or orcs or trolls or whatever, and we want to create pointy ears, ears with cuts and bites and all sorts of stuff. And you'll see it all has like the same base to it. And the second thing, I actually want to show you how to simplify the ear, and you'll see that most of the ears you see on like characters, like in different animation shows and stuff like that. When we simplify the ear, it's actually taking those three main shapes where we learned, and we kind of represent those shapes in a simpler shape or with one line or something like that. It all correspond with those basic shapes, the same three shapes. So let's do something like that. I will kind of hide everything. Okay. So I will create quickly another ear, and I will show you something kind of cool. So let's say I have this. So here I'm kind of like try to make it feel more organic, like I'm not trying to create the same width all along, and I try to play around with it and like actually have like kind of random thing going on while I'm creating those same shapes I used to create. So imagine this, like let's say I want to create a year for an elf character, right? So what I want you to imagine is basically you are giving your ear a pointy hat. Okay, so we just want to imagine that we put a hat here. Okay, it's like a birthday hat. And now when we put this hat, like the base shape changed. So what happens to the shape inside? The shape inside will actually correspond to the base shape most of the time. So that means that if I put this hat on top of the ear, I'm left with, let's say, something like this. Now look that I'm using those same three shapes. So let's begin with the top one. So I'll go here and I'll go with the contour line, with my new contour line, and just do this. It's the same shape I previously created. I just like update it to my new contour. And like all the shapes inside are actually pretty much the same. And I can update like this shape to correspond to the new sizes as well. So basically I kind of stretched out those inner shapes to fit my new shape. Another thing you can sometimes see, if I want to create something that will feel like less human, more a little bit like more animalistic. So if we like observe characters like different orcs in like Lord of the Rings or different stuff like that. So the ear should be like less human. And if you observe like ears of even cats and dogs and maybe like, I don't know, uh, different animals, what you will find is that like basically most of the time the top part is very thin, and like all of these shapes we have going around there are all located and bunched in the bottom part of the ear, and like the top part is kind of thin and pretty much empty. Sometimes we can see like blood vessels in there and stuff like that. So that means that even if I'll go with the same shape, like let's say I'm beginning with the same shape and I'll actually cut it and add a little bit of bite here and a bite there and do something that will look a little bit more creature-like. Okay, so what I will do here is I will go and create like the bottom shapes that we already familiar with, and then I will decide that these shapes kind of fades out. This shape kind of fades out, and I will like purposely purposely will keep all those small shapes fairly small and here, just because I want like this part of the ear to look like very thin. Maybe I want to have like different like blood vessels appearing here. And imagine that if I kind of if I wanted to render this ear, to render it out, I would probably have like light like scattering, like subsurface scattering and passing through the ear, because I kind of imagined this part of the ear is very thin. So I don't always have to take all of the shapes and stretch them. It's kind of a choice, but obviously we can pick like one or the other. So let's do like a few quick different ones. So I have like my base here. What if I'll create something that is really like creaturey, or something that goes and do something like this? So I'm trying to play around with different shapes, maybe create something that has fold to it. Like, look at what I'm doing here. I'm actually like really folding this shape. And let's create maybe one that has, I don't know, just more rounded. So those all different shapes, and once we are familiar with those three organic shapes inside, we can actually decide how we want to fit them to our new shape. So here I will go with something I already did and probably do something like this. And here I actually wanted to be even more creaturey, so I'll probably go and do something like this, and I even create a few holes inside. Maybe I'll also have like a small ring here. And here I have this fold, and I actually want to use this fold and create, and you see like sometimes, like look at this thing, little thing right here. It's not even like intended. Like sometimes when I draw, when I think like on organic shapes, sometimes I allow my hand to do things that like I kind of let it loose. I sometimes like I want those like happy mistakes. Like I kind of let my hand do like add different details, just by making my hand like very very loose and try. I can take like a shape that can look like that, and then I'll say, okay, what if I'll create a small bump here and a small bump there, and it actually goes a long way sometimes. And let's create this one here, and here I'll decide that it has like very big middle part. Okay, so you can actually see those are like four totally different ears, but they all use like the same shapes with different adjustments to them. Okay, so this is like basically it. And maybe let's talk a little bit on how to simplify those shapes. Um, so I see that right now we have only one canvas. So sorry, we have two canvases. So I think that what I will do is maybe I will jump for a little bit to the canvases and then go back and talk a little bit about how to simplify the ears. In what order should I learn fundamentals for concept art? Well, it's actually a great question. Uh, so actually recently I kind of gave a suggestion, a kind of an advice, which I feel is something that is very easy to do. And I do think that when you're learning, like especially if you're learning by yourself, online or different ways, um, I think like the most difficult thing is to actually know what you should learn first. And people are usually go with what feels like the sexiest. Like we want to know how to render and how to color and how to do like, and usually we skip some fundamental things. So one thing you can do is actually go to different sites of different art schools. And most art schools, they usually they kind of they put like their curriculum out there. They will basically market their courses, and they will say we're teaching this and this and this and this, and they kind of put their curriculum out there, and you can actually use it as like a guide. So they say, okay, if in this school they're saying that they're teaching this first and this second, da, 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 you can actually use it as a list and say, let's try to go with the same order of subjects. So that's one thing you can do. And for my personal opinion, it should always, 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 for my personal opinion, start with perspective. Like I feel like perspective is like it's like the umbrella that covers everything. Nothing is like over perspective. Like if you look at the clouds, even the clouds that are so amorphic and so the clouds correspond to perspective. If someone smokes a cigarette and blows smoke, the smoke has perspective. Everything has perspective. So you can be a master at anatomy, but if you don't master perspective, then even though you know like all the bones and all the muscle groups, they probably will all be distorted just because they're not in the right perspective. So I feel like perspective will always be first for me. And then after perspective, I feel like it's also important to note what is most important to you. I feel like that today in most places when they teach art, um, they kind of teach everything. Like um, what I mean by that is usually when you learn art, you learn it in a general way. You don't like learn how to be a character artist or environment artist. You usually learn everything, and then you decide to focus on characters, to focus on environment, to focus on vehicles, to focus on different things, right? And I feel that it's sometimes okay to focus on things in advance. Like if someone enjoys drawing characters, I don't see anything wrong with him focusing on drawing character. It still means that he will learn perspective. He will learn like how to render and um, how light will react and how to light and shade and how to do textures and how to I don't know render different materials and how to create dynamic poses and everything. But he can learn all those subjects while doing something that he enjoys. And then here is also important to understand if someone want to be an actual professional and work in the industry, or just want to learn because he enjoys drawing. Yeah, perspective first. Copy what other schools are doing, and I think you're good to go. Um, let's take a look at what's going on here in different canvases. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about this profile head here. Um, when most of the time, when we look at the skull, when we look, Sol, I took a look. I saw that you did your work with the layers here.
Yeah.
Yeah. It didn't slip me. Okay, so when we're doing the head in profile view, we have this jawline right here. This jawline will most of the time be in the middle of the head in the profile view. So we either have two options. If the head starts here till here, the middle will be somewhere here. So either we're moving this jawline a little bit here, or we're saying that, yeah, the jaw is perfectly fine. We just want to make this head a little bit more oval, and then it will actually be more in the middle. But either way, just make sure that this line will be more in the middle of the head. And so it will be more correct. And the placement of the ear in relation to the jaw is perfectly fine. Now, I do want to also say something about the shape here. Like, if we're using the simple shape, the reason I kind of give example of this half of a heart, it's because it's kind of important to make sure that the bottom part right here, from here to here, it should be a lot thinner than the top part, right? So we have like this part, like this curve is a lot thinner than this curve. And here it's kind of the same. We have like this curve, and actually this curve is even like thicker. So try to take a note to that as well. Perspective looks fine. Let's look at the different shapes. Okay, so the shapes here, they look fine. Like this, usually like this part is a little bit more pointy. Is a little bit more pointy. But not always. Yeah, it can be also like the small bump. Like I actually saw like some people that like almost we don't see like the bottom bump. So it kind of, I guess it's also fine to do it like that. And let's talk a little bit about like the big space that you have here, and also there is also kind of a big space you have here. Uh, and here as well. So usually, most of the time, if we look at like if you look at reference and kind of observe different ear, like those shapes are kind of more tight together, and usually they won't leave like those big spaces between them. So everything will be more tight together. So if I'm kind of using like the same size and shape you did. So I have like the top part, and then I have this bump, and then this bump, and I'll kind of try to squeeze everything so it will have less spaces in between, like less negative spaces in between. Will actually, I think, feel better. But again, when it goes like with different body parts, we can see different things with different people, so we kind of try to like create a setting point for ourselves. Great work. Let's see what we got here. Oh, I like it. Very nice. I probably will make this part a little bit thinner. It usually doesn't go like this thick, so I'll probably try to make it a little bit thinner, and it goes inside. It actually goes inside and sticks to the inner part of the ear. You can actually feel it with the finger, and I feel like it's another thing that it's good to note. Like instead of only observing, like I think it's actually good to feel it with your hands and actually like it's another layer of information for the brain of for what's going on there.
That's one of those things where I feel like that when you were mentioning earlier sculpting, the sculpture it gives you a sense of like a real sense of depth where you
Mhm.
sculpting and figuring out those shapes and feeling it. Even sculpting it in clay, if you were to do it with your hands, would be probably practical, right?
Yeah, so I feel like this will be like the thing that will that like real physical sculpting will have over like 3D digital sculpting. It's like I think like digital sculpting is awesome. I really like it and I really enjoy it, but I feel like it has missing like the layer of actually the touch, like actually like I feel like we don't really realize how much information we can observe only by like feeling around different things. um, so yeah, you can look with your eyes and see like how deep a certain dent goes, and then you can actually put your finger there, and you will have this information. If it covers your entire finger or part of your finger is sticking out, it's like it goes back to like comparing things to a cereal box, right?
Right.
You have like another layer of information which is actually very important. I really like in what you did here. It feels very organic. I really like it that the shape change. It doesn't feel like you're doing the same shape over and over again, and it feels like the shapes are kind of organic and you're kind of loose with it. So it looks great, and it looks like organic and random. And I really like also what you did here. Looks great, and the angles looks great. So a great job here. And I think this one is still empty. So let's go back to what I was doing and talk a little bit on how to simplify the ear shape. So think of it, when you simplify anything, we can actually learn from what we're about to do. We're talking about ears, but simplification, it's simplification. It's like the same principle will apply to simplify the eye or simplify the nose. So what I go by with is, first of all, you want to simplify the bigger shapes. So you probably heard it before, and I will say it as well. You usually start with the bigger shapes. Those are the shapes that our eye usually catch first, and then go more in depth and more into detail. And those bigger shapes are usually more important than the smaller shapes, right? So when you want to simplify something, sometimes I feel like the mistake people are doing is like they want to simplify something that they just say, so let's just add less detail, which is correct. But if we add less detail, which means like I have less of complex shapes inside the ear, but I still have a complex shape around. So I didn't really simplify it as much as I think. So first, we have to simplify the bigger shape. Once we simplify the bigger shape, then we simplify the smaller shapes, and maybe we even like get rid of some of them. So let's do again. I'll hide this layer here, and I'll leave like this basic here, and let's just simplify the bigger shape first. So for example, you see that in this shape I have like this small dent here. So I can probably get rid of it. And you can see that the curve is not like, it's not like a sphere. It has like a small point here. Like there's a little bit of an angle to it. So maybe I can get rid of it as well. So if I'm trying to actually make like this basic ear very simple, I'm actually going back to the first shape when I use like this half heart shape. Very, very simple, very rounded, no no added details. Like think of it that every dent, if I'm looking and I'm creating a small dent, it's another detail. Now I'm not saying don't. We can actually decide that it still will be a simple shape, but we want to give this ear a little bit of character, so we want this dent inside. But if I took this ear and I try to probably make it more realistic, so in a realistic view, it will probably have some more details that won't appear in the simplified version. So, and then let's create like different, maybe create the ear a little bit more rounded, or let's create this ear a little bit like that, and create another one that is more rounded, and another one that maybe would look like a complete, like a Smurf ear, like a complete circle or something. And what I will do is I'll try to simplify like the inner details more and more. So first of all, let's do and like give a small representation for every one of those shapes. Now, there isn't one way to represent a shape, so we can play around with it. So if I'm looking at the first shape we did in the upper half that goes with the contour, I can actually say, okay, let's put this shape here, and I don't have to create it all the way. And then I can actually say, so let's put this shape here, and to like represent the shape in the middle, what if I'll just give it like a small line, just to say there's something going on there, okay? I don't have to create the entire shape. So I actually made every shape a little bit simpler. I decided to get rid of this bump right here, and with the split, I don't have to show the split, but I did show that there is something going on here. Sometimes when we simplify things, we connect few shapes and merge them together to one shape. It actually makes things more simple because instead of having like a lot of things, we are kind of simplified by making it one thing. So what if we connect, and you'll see that you've probably seen it many times before in different characters. What if we connect the first shape, which we did right here in the top? So we had like this first shape. What if we just connect it with the second one? Okay, so you've probably seen this here many times. Okay, so I actually like took one line that caught like those two main shapes together. Now here I can also decide that I can add like another detail or something if I like, but I can also leave it very, very simple. Another thing is to like also kind of stylize it and give it like your own interpretation. So I can actually take like this first shape here and then like decide that I want to make this shape go from the first one. And it kind of a smurf here, okay? But now when you see those shapes, you can actually realize, wait a minute, all those simple shapes on those simple lines are basically in some way a representation of the shapes that we have here. So I'm kind of like playing around with those shapes, and I can make it like fairly realistic or have more details or less details. Maybe just create this one like here. Like my base shape look kind of simple, but I can actually kind of more complex, but I can actually make this part feel more simple. And like I actually created even the middle shape, but I decided to like get rid of the split of the shape, so it will have like less detail. It's something that we can look in, like if you look at I don't know, Legend of Korra, Avatar Airbender. So you can like, the ears are kind of stylized but still fairly realistic. um, so basically it's all playing around with those shapes and try to make it as simple as you feel is correct for your style. And maybe another thing about how to simplify things, when you simplify something, don't look at it in like a tunnel vision, like focusing only on the ear, only on the eye, only on the nose. Try to figure out what you did with different parts and look at the overall detail of your characters, and try to figure out like how detailed or how simplified I want this ear to be, and how it will look fair in comparison to what I did inside the face, inside the nose, inside different parts. Now, obviously, there are some styles that has like that, what they do is like, let's take anime for example. Okay, now I'm not an anime artist, so I'm a little bit out of my element, but if we take anime for example, you have things that are very detailed that go alongside with things that are very simplified. So you can see an anime character that has like very detailed hair, or very detailed ears, or very detailed eye, but it will have like the most simplified nose or a very simplified head shape. So obviously there are like certain different styles that has like their own like set of rules to them. And I'm sure that if you like anime and you're drawing anime, you probably know that better than me. But if we'll take like a more general approach to it, most of the time I'm kind of trying to see like how much detail did I put inside the nose, how much detail did I put overall inside the face, how much detail did I give the ear, the eye. And then when I start to decide to add the ears, I'll probably work in the same way. It's like you're creating this fantasy universe, and even in the fantasy universe, when it's not realistic at all, it has rules to it. You kind of creating a world, and this world has like its own physics and its own rules. Like, you probably can all relate to seeing a movie which can be like a sci-fi movie or a fantasy movie. So basically it's not realistic, everything can happen, and then you see a certain scene or a certain part that happens inside the movie and you feel like, it doesn't make sense. Now, how can it not make sense if we have flying creatures, right? It's because the director kind of gave us the feeling that this world behaves in a certain way, and then he created like this set of rules of this magical universe, right? So even if everything is like fantasy or sci-fi, it still has its own logic to it. So actually simplifying art or simplifying characters, it's kind of the same way. We actually creating like these rules when we say in this universe, the hair is very detailed, but the face isn't. So now if you have like all of a sudden a character appearing with very detailed face, it feels like it's doesn't belong to this world, right? So like if we take even the Smurfs, for example, so you looked like the way they simplify the ear, but then look at how they're drawing the eyes, how they're drawing the nose, how they're drawing the mouth. You probably won't see anything that all of a sudden looks super detailed next to something that is very simplified. So try to keep it in mind. And another thing to keep in mind when we talk about simplification is actually like when you create an area, a specific area that has many details inside, you actually sometimes not knowingly creating like a focal point. Like our eye usually it goes to where we have like a lot of contrast, or places that are very very busy. So let's say that I don't have many details inside the face, and then I create a ear and I put like a lot of details inside this ear. So there's nothing really to look at or to like observe, or like inside the face, because it's very simple, but there is a lot of going on here in the ear. So you kind of focusing on it. So it's another thing to note, like try to pay attention to where the details is also important, and where it's less important, and in a focal point sort of way to it.
That's really powerful information. I was going to jump in and say something, and you've illustrated that point so well. This idea of stylization, where it's almost like, as I observe when you're focusing on the ear, kind of pointing to how you define your own rules, even going as deep as say how much curvature a line has versus being more angular, or stylizing your strokes in a certain way that you can apply across other areas of the model to define this sort of theme or style. That part probably being where the artist has the most control or flexibility for it, because right now we're talking about anatomy and structure, but then where you get to kind of play creator is this particular part. You understand the basics. Once you understand the basics, rather, you can start to experiment with this. I'd be curious to know, in your experience, while defining your style, which I very much, you have a very versatile skill set, and you can apply something based on what somebody wants you to. But when I look at your work, there's a consistency to it. How long did it take you to develop that? How much time did you spend kind of fleshing those things out and figuring that part out?
Hmm. So first of all, I still kind of dislike most of the things I do. So
As most artists do.
yeah, yeah, and yeah, I think I've kind of accepted that it's like, like the donkey that goes after the stick with the carrot.
Right.
I kind of accepted that I will never get there. For me, I think like for me, like actually start noticing, and developing like those skills for like being consistent in a certain style. It's probably I think like around 10 years ago. And like I'm 41 years old. I I'm drawing like as long as I remember, like since I was a kid. But actually, like deciding to learn how to draw, I probably was around like the age of 20. Um, till then, I drew only for fun and for myself, and I didn't really like dive into it. And back then, we didn't have YouTube and Magma Classroom and all those online classes. So most of my initial learning was basically books. And yeah, I was trying to like draw every page in those books again and again. Uh, but I feel like only like about 10 years after I decided that I want to learn, I kind of things started to fall in place for me. Like in this manner of like noticing patterns. I think like for me, actually, you know what? So it's I feel like that sometimes people are, let's say, someone follows an artist he really really likes, and he follows them on Instagram, and he's seeing this art, and he kind of want to imitate this artist, which I think is great. I think that a lot of people say that you have to find your own style and don't try to be. I think like imitation is like probably like the oldest and most natural way to practice and learn. Like even when you learn to walk, you imitate people. So let's say you find an artist you like and you want to imitate him, and you're doing like you're drawing the nose exactly like he does, and you're drawing the ear exactly like he does, and you're drawing the hair, but you look at the final result and you say, but why the final result doesn't look the same like his his work? And I feel like here what sometimes we miss is that for him he doesn't draw the ear and draw the nose and draw the hair. There will be some kind of pattern that connects all those two together, and there will be something that will repeat in each and every one of them. It could be like an angle that he breaks. It can be like a line that goes in a certain direction. It can be a curvature. It can be the amount of detail. It can be like different stuff. It can be actually the line art, like how thick is the line or how thin is the line. Where does it get thinner? Where does it get thicker? So all those things are actually patterns. And some of those patterns, artists like they make them knowingly. And some of the patterns are like they're there, but even the artist doesn't aware that he has those patterns.
Right. Right.
Eh, and so for me, like I remember a point when I started to look at like different artwork and try to actually learn different aspect of the art and try to find patterns, like things that are repeating themselves. And I think it's actually easier to do it if you don't try to dissect the entire piece. Let's say that you took like a certain artist, he drew a certain character. If you try to dissect the entire image, then you have tonality, you have color, you have lighting and shading, you have materials, textures, you have composition, you have anatomy, you have proportions, you have so many things that goes in there, and it's overwhelming and you probably won't get anything of it. It's like those machines that you go inside and you have like the dollar bills flying around and trying to grab them, right? But if you will have one bill flying in the wind and you just need to grab it, it will probably be easier. So I think like even when you try to dissect art or different work, what you want to do is like say, let's study his line art. Let's study the way he uses tonality. Let's study the way he uses different colors and color relations. So try to pick like specific subject in a certain artist's art, and then like try to find those patterns in that specific subjects. And I think you can actually, once you do it, you are getting better at it. And when you get better at it, that what will put you in a place where it will be easier for you to fit yourself in different styles. So I feel like, for me, there obviously there are styles that I can't really reproduce or imitate, which is natural. Uh, but for me, I think like I'm kind of versatile, and let's say if I'll take like the main styles or my expertise, the style that I mostly do, I can like step out of them into different styles that are very close to them, and like kind of change my skin as needed. And
Right.
it's fairly easy for me because of this way of thinking and try to dissect and find patterns in different styles.
Right.
Uh, yeah, so it's kind of a very
No,
analytical approach.
no, absolutely. It's wonderful insight. It brings to mind so many things. I think about the digital artist in today's day and age in terms of the styles and representations maybe that you're tasked with at work versus what you have time spending on at home, kind of investigating and studying as you've just described, which is a great analogy of like, you're in like a vacuum tunnel, like with floating dollar bills and you're grabbing one. I love this analogy because it kind of points to the necessity of, or rather, I guess the question is, depending on what you're seeking as an artist, if you're looking to really define your own pattern or style or way of going about applying these things and setting yourself apart from others, there's a great benefit into studying and practicing how others do things first, mainly because, and I think I can only relate this to myself, where I've always been a very visually stimulated person. I can look at something and I can replicate. One of the things that I wasted or I didn't spend enough time on when I was going through those phases, I wasn't necessarily looking to define my own style. Not until more recently, as I get older, I start to realize and become more aware of these things. But if you ask yourself the question, or rather you're studying the pattern to try to understand how they're applying something, as opposed to just copying, you're copying and following to study and learn the pattern, to understand how this person applies. And once you've done that enough, you can replicate it yourself. But by doing so, you've just added a tool in your belt where you now understand a certain way of applying something. Now, say you do that for a totally different styled artist, somebody who does it differently, and you reapply. Now you've got another tool under your belt. And I correlate back to, I don't know, I think about classical painters, for example. You go back to Michelangelo or anybody from that period. Those artists are famously known for being able to, I mean, maybe Da Vinci is a better example. Da Vinci he could paint in any style. He could go and paint, Michelangelo's paintings or another artist's style, and very differently and almost to perfection, because they study the technique and the patterns. And once you understand those patterns, and you tell me if this resonates, but that's where I see the real masters of their creative, passion or focus learn how to study these patterns correctly. And it's kind of like working out or doing a task where I think about it in terms of working out in that you start to understand your body and these practices and repetitions. Once you do that long enough, you start to really, you don't even have to think about it. Just like when I watch you sketch an ear, you don't even think about it. It's just boom, boom, boom. I got my curves. I got my stuff. It's because you understand it so well. Only then can you start to interject shifts or changes in it, right? You have to really, it has to be second nature. It has to be effortless for you to be able to then go, oh, I just want to flip this curve or angle this a little bit more or play around with how I angle that. You kind of can't get there until you do these things that you kind of described before.
Totally. So let's do another comparison, another analogy. Let's say you taste this very tasty cake, a pastry, right? So this baker has like all these different ingredients and techniques that he had, but probably if you can't like bake like the most basic simple cake, you probably won't go and do like all those crazy nitty stuff. So in order to step from where you at to different directions, you need to have like, you need to set a camp. And it's like camping. You need to set a camp, and then you can go this direction and go back, go this direction and go back. But you need like a setting point, which is very important. And by studying different styles and by studying the patterns, you're not only getting to a point where you can reproduce the specific piece you were studying, you can produce something new in the same style, which is very important. Like that's the point. Like, let's say that I have an artist that I really like, and he drew, I don't know, Spider-Man. So I can actually learn those patterns. But if I'm drawing Spider-Man, I actually trying to produce what I'm seeing. Learning the patterns, it what will allow me to draw Batman and make it look in the same style, and maybe it will look like this specific artist drew it. So learning the patterns, it will basically is learning how this universe and how these laws of this specific universe, artistic universe, how these laws work. And then I can create different stuff that will basically fit inside the rules of this universe. So yeah, so first of all, I really relate to it. And
Mm.
yeah, I feel like the way to go about it is like, first of all, as you said, you have to have like a base to it. I feel like if you can't really like draw ahead, you don't really, you're not, probably you're not in at a point where you need to be really worried with different styles right now. Like, just get it to a point when you
Right.
can draw a basic head. But you said something, and actually just yesterday I had a discussion about it, um, about like getting to a point when you want to find your style. So I feel I have like a very different opinion about personal style, I think, from most artists and most teachers. So first of all, I divide it into two different things. I will call one of them personal style, and the other I will call a fingerprint. So every artist has his own fingerprint, and sometimes we can even call this fingerprint a style, because like I can draw in different styles, and most of the people that know my work, even when I draw in different style, they can say this one belongs to Udi, this one belongs to Udi, this one belongs to Udi. They can see me in those different, totally different styles, but they can still feel me in this image, because I have this fingerprint there. Now, the fingerprint is not something you need to find. It's actually something you can't escape. Okay, so you don't need to go and find the certain thing that makes you you. You can't escape it.
Mm.
We're trying sometimes to imitate someone. If I drew the Mona Lisa, it won't be Leonardo da Vinci's Mona Lisa. It will be Mona Lisa by Udi, and you can probably tell. So you have your own fingerprint. I think if you see sometimes, like, I really like to see like different work for character designers that they are doing. Let's say you take a certain movie, a Pixar movie, and you see like different the character designers that are creating sketches for a Pixar movie and different characters, right? So they're all drawing in the style of Pixar, right? They're creating characters for Pixar. They're all trying to fit their style and to fit their characters so they fit to a Pixar movie. But you can still see the difference and the fingerprint, and you can still see the difference between this artist and this artist and this artist.
Right.
So it's like it's a Pixar character by X and a Pixar character by Y. So there is something that you can't really escape. Now let's look at the other thing, which actually uh, developing a personal style. So I think a personal style, it's not something you kind of develop or find. It's something you choose if you want to choose. Now, if we're talking about dissecting patterns and learning different patterns, and maybe decide which patterns you want to apply to your art. So basically, developing a personal style, it means that I really like this set of rules. I really like this set of patterns, and I like them so much that I want to use them in everything I do, and that becomes a choice. And then my personal style is it's actually something I choose. I really like the appeal of like doing like straight lines and break like very like sharp angles. So that becomes something that I like to do. I do it in all my characters, and then it becomes my style. And maybe it's like picking certain colors, and then you really like the way certain colors feel together, and you do it like in every one of your drawings. So then it becomes your style. But I think it's a choice. It's not something you kind of develop or need to find. It's something you pick. And for me personally, I get bored really, really fast. Like if I say to myself, I want to choose or develop a personal style, what will happen for me is that probably for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, I will draw in that certain style with those certain patterns, with those certain like mechanics all over and over again. And then I will get bored. And it's like, I really like to eat a certain dish, but if I'll have the same dish every day, I'll probably get bored of it, right?
Hmm.
So sometimes I kind of even find it hard to relate. Like I see like artists that are like they're sticking to a certain style for like 20 years. It's so specific, it's so their style. And I'm saying, man, don't you want to create something different?
Right. Right.
Right? Like,
It speaks to the
don't you?
diversity of humans, the diversity of the creative experience overall. It's like I see very much, and this is a great, of course, a great compliment, but there's a lot that you and Da Vinci can relate on. It sounds like, I mean, if you look at the breadth of what his brain sort of pushed him towards in the various things that he experimented with, I can also relate to this, and this is why I also share the same sentiment that I struggle with liking and appreciating anything that I create, or really loving it, because it's, for me, it's less about, I think some folks, some of the best and most talented artists, ones that go on to create animated series and get focused on a thing that will last for 20 or 30 years and they keep doing it, is that for them maybe it's not, it's more about the finessing and tweaking of this one vessel, this one thing, and that fulfills them. But for others, it's different, where you need to kind of exercise a different applications and change things up and learn something new and try and tweak things a little bit, where others, it's just not necessarily as big of an issue.
Yeah, obviously there isn't one truth or one answer. Like I really like the reason I really like and relate to the Renaissance period is because they kind of believed that you don't have to be like, the saying, jack of all trade, master at none, right? So in the Renaissance period, you can be master of different trades.
Right.
And I personally believe you can. Like I really enjoy to do a lot of different things, and I know in my personal life, like different hobbies and different things I do. Like I took like a lot of those things to kind of professional or semi-professional level to it. Like even in sports, in different things,
Yeah.
right? So I wasn't like 100% only invested in doing this one thing because I want to be like this master at one thing. But I have a good friend which is a great artist that I admire, and he has like a very specific style when he draws. And I once asked them, man, don't you want to like mix things up, trying to do something else? And he told me it took me like about 10 years to refine my style, and to get it to where it is right now. Why would I want to start all over again? So, it's like a totally different point of view, which I didn't relate, but I can understand.
Hmm.
So yeah, it looks like it looks at it like I'm for 10 years I'm like tweaking my instrument
Right.
and make it more exact and more exact. So for me, like changing a style, I look at it, oh, okay, I just want to eat something different today.
Hmm.
And if I'm doing something different, I probably I won't care if it's not like the best thing I've drew, right? Because I'm doing something different and it's an experience. And maybe if I'm trying to play around with something different and a different style, it probably won't look, maybe it would look less good or than what I kind of accustomed to do.
Yeah.
Uh, so I can also see the reason behind this point of view. But yeah, for me, it's like I get bored, man.
It's that's a good point to leave it on. And I love I love these conversations so much because I think that it speaks to the value of, or rather the point to remember when it comes to creative pursuits in seeking and finding. I feel like this is something I always tend to bring into conversation with folks like you that we have on the podcast or have in classroom sessions or just out in the wild talking to people in random places. I think it's incredibly important to remind ourselves what this is about. It's like finding happiness in the process of what you're doing. And that, I can relate to many years that I've spent being unhappy about my creative process, and yet still continuing to do it as if I was seeking some magical thing at the end where it's like, oh, if I just get here, then I'll be happy. And it never happened, and the reason it never happens, if you think that way, and I would be as bold as to say, is this is a constant with anyone, is that you aren't thinking about it the right way. You're thinking about it from the perspective that it's a dangling carrot that you have to reach. And if anything, it's more so to learn. And I've mentioned this in other streams, is to know yourself, to know which type of person you are. Are you the person that is going to be fulfilled if you can build up? Some people prefer, that's one example where you're building on top of something and you have a foundation that you don't want to lose and you want to keep building. You want to build a skyscraper. Whereas maybe folks like you and I would rather build, buildings that are 10, 15 stories high. They aren't quite skyscrapers, but we'd like to build a bigger city. We'd like to build more in terms of volume.
I
So
really like this analogy.
yeah, knowing that, accepting that particular aspect makes it that much easier to go, okay, I'm not striving to be the skyscraper person. I'm striving to be somebody else. And I'm going to fulfill myself with these pursuits and know that when I put my pen down or I stop for the day, I've completed my task, and I'm going to continue doing that, for the rest of my life. And that's something to gain some sort of positive feedback from, right? To inspire you to keep pushing. And if anything, to remind yourself that for you're if you're that kind of person as well, anybody that's listening, more likely then you'll be way more fulfilled by challenging yourself with other things and trying new things out, instead of, because I've been there where I didn't accept myself as that version, and I wanted to think that I was going to be that master of something else, and I just never could land it, and I think that that's just my unique experience in life. And that comes down to what it was like for you growing up, what was, what your parents are like, what your environment was like, who are your role models, what tools and skills did you learn up to this point in your life. All those things are incredibly important, but ultimately just knowing yourself helps a great deal in terms of how you learn to apply your skills and your abilities.
Yeah. If someone, let's say someone knows, I want to be professional, and you and I both like to compare things to sports, right? So if someone knows he wants to be a professional, he will probably have a different approach than a hobbyist. So let's say if someone likes sports and he likes to ride a bike, so he takes his bike like twice a week, and he has like a certain route that he really likes. And sometimes if he's tired and if he likes to actually cut it short for this day, so it holds like very intuitive and very fun, and he's doing it for fun. And if someone is like he wants to compete, he has like this very strict regimen and training and nutrition and everything around it, and probably will have days that he don't feel like doing it, and he will do it anyway. So and I think that's fine as well, like to take this approach, especially if it's like a period in your life, like let's say you're learning for 4 years, 5 years, where you're kind of like, I want to be professional and I want to be more strict, and that's okay. But let's say if you want to draw for fun, or maybe you reach a certain point in your life when you were like this man, like this artist that is really meticulous and has like a very strict, I don't know, a regime of practice and learning and stuff like that. But you reach a certain point when you want to say, okay, I want to go back to having fun. And for me, like I think like less than 5 years ago, there was a big change for me because I was really burnt out and I lost like the motivation to draw, and I didn't have any inspiration, and like I had like these long periods of several months when I didn't want to pick up a pencil or my Wacom or whatever. And I felt like it's not fun anymore. I couldn't draw without like really judging what I'm doing and like dissecting, and like I need things to be correct and things to always get better, and it kind of took the fun out of it. And one day I realized I like started thinking on how I used to draw when I was a kid, like really a kid, like 5 years old, 6 years old, and I can draw for hours now. Back then, I didn't draw to impress anyone. I didn't want to impress anyone. I had like this idea inside my head, and I had like this enthusiasm about this idea, and I just needed an outlet. I needed to express the things I'm excited about and I'm enthusiastic about, and I needed to get it out somehow. And I didn't think about impressing anyone. I didn't judge my own art. Like once I created like this monster I imagined, I didn't start thinking like if my perspective is correct or if I got the correct anatomy. Nothing. It was like pure fun, and I wanted to get back to it. And then what I decided doing is like I decided to actually draw like only the things that I feel like drawing, and not like thinking on this is too simple, this is like I need something more challenging, something more complicated. I'm a teacher. I need to I know that my students look at the things that I share, and maybe the things will look like maybe the thing I want to draw is it will look too simple or look not professional or whatever. And in a certain point I like dismissed like
Mm,
all of it.
right.
Yeah.
That helps tremendously, right? That's a letting go of a certain whatever it is, ego. There's so many, I think, combinations of things that push us down a path where we become very hypercritical of ourselves or the things that we do, and usually that means it's not just your art, it's every aspect of your life. Like this is a part of it. To your point earlier, that's your fingerprint on life, and identifying what that is. The cool thing about it is a lot of people will tell you that people don't change. People don't change because they don't really know how to. They don't know how to adapt. You can tweak and modify the way that you deal with things. And it sounds like in that particular case, you've been able to successfully achieve that in that, you probably, and I'm going through this phase of my life in my 30s where like I've been struggling with that creative block. And a part of it is everything you just described. It's this critical assessment of myself and things that I do and things that I've done. And I've had to, just through time and wanting to not feel that way anymore, you kind of go, well, I can continue to feel this way and struggle up this mountain, or I can maybe just give myself a little grace and accept some of these aspects. And by doing so, you end up freeing up all this source of energy, this motivation that exists, that was there when you were a kid, when you're applying it to your drawings at the time, and you just didn't have some of the stresses and the fears and doubts that come with just living amongst other people. I think that's ultimately the way I look at it. Based on what you described, I can relate to all of those things, and I've come to, at least I can say the words. Of course, putting it into practice is always a challenge. You have to do it every single day. You have to remind yourself, if it's this hard, you have to remind yourself every day that there's a part of that innocence that you have to try to maintain in every aspect of life, and let go of some of these other things and these comparisons and everything else in order to fulfill your real desires and be the person that you really were meant to be. Our influences from other people, I think, is one of the biggest challenges in the human experience in general, particularly I think for artists, because artists, anybody who has to apply a very a high level skill set, professional athletes. It's like, I love the sports analogy and I relate to that. I use that a lot as well, not because of sports as much as it is because it's a mind body connection. And I feel like with artists, it's similar or very much the same pattern of thinking. It's a mind body connection where you have to get into like a mental flow state. In like some of the best basketball players or hockey players or soccer players, you can be a technical utility player or artist as well, a technical utility artist, somebody who learns the patterns enough you can apply and execute across different, tool sets. Or you get those like Messi's or those like amazing players that just do something that others don't. And they're the ones that have just found that, whether you want to call it innocence or that flow state or that thing, they're tapped into it. And that's another skill set entirely, which is all in your mind. It's all about how you perceive things. And, I feel like these types of conversations are so important and don't happen enough in art. That you watch a lot of videos in YouTube, you watch a lot of content and take a lot of workshops from other people who will show you a process. And a process is, to the kind of point that you were making earlier, studying and learning somebody's patterns and those things, that part always important. But if you're not getting enough of these other aspects, this other, way of thinking about things, you're missing something, and those people at the top tier, the top of any category period, they've all got this one thing figured out. Michael Jordan didn't, he wasn't a utility player. I mean, that guy would just take off and do things that nobody could believe. And that's because I really think it's like, it's probably learning how to turn off certain things. You don't think about some stuff. You got to put some things aside, put it on the shelf for later. Some things you need to think about in a certain way, but a lot of times when you want to achieve your best possible results in anything, you got to turn a bunch of switches off and just go, right?
Yeah, I can't agree more. I can't agree more. Totally. Yeah.
Well, this is a great conversation and a wonderful lecture. These fundamentals are amazing, and we're getting just the viewership and the people that are watching these things. We're getting great feedback. We've had some comments here. I want to make sure that we drop this stuff in. Yeah, Aiko's giving us a shout out on this conversation. Thank you everybody for your contributions, for participating. We'll be back. Udi, you'll be back in 2 weeks, 2 Tuesdays from now. It sounds like we're going to focus on the nose. Does that sound good for you?
Yeah, I think we'll probably play around with the structuring of the head like for a while, and then go to something else. Yeah, let's do noses. I'm the nose guy. Check it out.
I would love to round this up now that we've we started with character design as a global perspective, focusing deeper on the head and the ears, construction of the head, all those things combined, maybe with the nose would be a great way to maybe segue afterwards. But we'll definitely be updating you guys with information in our channels. And of course, if you're watching and you would like to know more, follow us on Discord. Discord link is available in the description. And Udi, thanks a ton, man. This is always a pleasure.
Sure, man. I like to talk with you so much. Like we always have like those conversations that leaves me thinking afterwards. So I appreciate it and thank you, man.
Of course, it's truly my pleasure, and the feelings are mutual. So cheers, man. Thanks for everything. We'll see you next time.
Cheers. Bye-bye.